When the next recession hits, some states will survive. Others will collapse entirely. We're talking empty emergency funds, dying industries, and debt spiraling out of control. Millions of Americans have tied their savings, their homes, and their futures to states already crumbling from the inside. These are the 10 most vulnerable states. West Virginia has been called a comeback story. Politicians point to energy investments, infrastructure projects, and a low cost of living as proof the state is turning a corner. But when you dig into the numbers, the picture looks very different. The state's economy remains dangerously dependent on coal, an industry that's been bleeding jobs for over a decade. In the last 5 years alone, coal employment has dropped by nearly 40%. Entire communities that once thrived on mining wages are now hollowed out. Drive through towns like Logan or Welch, and you'll see boarded-up storefronts, closed diners, for sale signs that have been sitting in yards for years. Main streets that used to bustle with workers cashing paychecks now sit eerily quiet. The unemployment rate hovers around 5.8%, well above the national average. But the real damage is in the labor force participation rate. West Virginia has one of the lowest in the nation, sitting below 55%. That means nearly half the working-age population isn't even counted in unemployment figures because they've stopped looking for work entirely. These are people who've given up, who've watched their skills become obsolete, who've seen every job opportunity dry up. For anyone with retirement savings tied to West Virginia property values, the outlook is grim. Home prices remain stagnant, while the rest of the country has seen appreciation. The median home value sits around $128,000. Sounds affordable until you realize there's almost no demand. Houses sit on the market for months, sometimes years. If you need to sell quickly during a recession, you may not find a buyer at any price. Your equity becomes worthless. The state's rainy day fund is dangerously thin. West Virginia keeps less than 15% of its annual budget in reserves. When federal stimulus dries up and tax revenues crater, there's no cushion to absorb the blow. Services will be cut, teachers laid off, roads left to crumble. Healthcare is another ticking time bomb. Rural hospitals have been closing at an alarming rate. Since 2010, multiple facilities have shut their doors. Residents now drive an hour or more for basic medical care. Emergency situations become life-threatening simply due to distance. In a recession, when Medicaid rolls expand and state budgets tighten, these closures will only accelerate. The promise was revival. The reality is a state running on fumes, propped up by federal dollars and false hope. For anyone who moved here chasing affordability, you may have bought into a market with no floor. Louisiana sells itself as a cultural treasure. Jazz, cuisine, festivals, and Southern hospitality. What they don't advertise is the state's catastrophic financial position. Louisiana ranks dead last in rainy day fund reserves. The state holds just 2.1% of its annual budget in emergency savings. To put that in perspective, financial experts recommend at least 10% as a bare minimum. Louisiana isn't even close. When recession hits, there's no buffer. The state will be forced into immediate, brutal cuts. Schools, infrastructure, public safety, healthcare, everything on the chopping block. The unemployment rate sits at 6.6%, one of the highest in the nation. But the raw numbers don't capture the human cost. Over 54,000 jobs have vanished in the last 3 years. Walk through downtown Shreveport or the industrial corridors outside Baton Rouge, and you'll see the damage. Quiet office parks with weeds growing through the cracks. Shuttered warehouses with rust forming on the doors. Parking lots that used to be full at 8 a.m., now sitting empty at noon. The oil and gas industry, once the backbone of Louisiana's economy, has been in structural decline. Global energy transitions, automation, and volatile commodity prices have gutted employment in the sector. Towns that were built around refineries and drilling operations are watching their tax bases evaporate. The money that funded schools and roads is disappearing, and it's not coming back. For homeowners, the risks extend beyond the economy. Louisiana faces some of the highest flood insurance costs in the country, and they're rising every year. Properties that were affordable 5 years ago now carry insurance premiums that can exceed $5,000 annually. When a recession squeezes household budgets, those payments become impossible, and foreclosures spike. Neighborhoods that survived hurricanes may not survive the economic storm. The state's infrastructure is crumbling. Roads, bridges, and levees rated structurally deficient or obsolete. The same systems meant to protect residents from the next hurricane are falling apart while the state lacks the funds to repair them. One major storm during a recession could be catastrophic. If you've tied your financial future to Louisiana real estate or employment, understand this. The state has no margin for error. One economic shock, one major storm, one more round of industry layoffs, and the whole system buckles. Mississippi has the highest poverty rate in America. Over 19% of residents live below the poverty line. That's not a temporary dip. That's been the reality for decades. And when recession hits, states with high baseline poverty don't just struggle, they collapse. The state's median household income sits around $48,000, the lowest in the nation. Working families are already stretched thin. There's no savings buffer, no emergency fund, no ability to absorb a job, loss, or medical emergency. Credit cards are maxed. Payday loans are common. When layoffs come, Mississippi residents fall off the financial cliff faster than almost anyone else in the country. The healthcare system is in crisis. Rural hospitals have been closing at a rate that would be alarming anywhere else, but has become normalized in Mississippi. Entire counties now lack a single hospital bed. Residents drive 45 minutes or more to reach an emergency room. Heart attacks, strokes, accidents all become more deadly when help is an hour away. During a recession, when state Medicaid budgets get slashed and hospitals lose even more funding, these closures accelerate. Infrastructure is another disaster waiting to happen. Over 1,100 bridges in Mississippi are rated structurally deficient. Water systems in cities like Jackson have made national headlines for failures that left residents without safe drinking water for weeks. Boil advisories, brown water from taps, schools closed. The state simply doesn't have the tax base or reserves to fix these problems, and recession will make them worse. For anyone who bought property in Mississippi expecting appreciation, the math doesn't work. Home values have remained essentially flat for years. The median home price sits around $160,000, but demand is weak and population is declining. Young people leave for opportunities elsewhere. Retirees who are attracted by low prices find themselves stuck in a state that can't provide basic services. Isn't it strange how politicians keep calling Mississippi business-friendly while residents can't even get clean water? The promise was affordability and Southern charm. The reality is a state that's been in slow-motion collapse for years, and recession will only speed up the timeline. New Mexico looks stable on the surface. Government jobs, military bases, national laboratories. The kind of employment that seems recession-proof. But underneath that federal safety net, the state's economy is dangerously fragile. Oil and gas extraction accounts for nearly 40% of New Mexico's state revenue. When energy prices crashed in 2020, the state budget cratered almost overnight. They've recovered somewhat, but the structural vulnerability remains. One sustained period of low oil prices, and New Mexico's budget goes into freefall. Programs get cut, workers get laid off, communities suffer. The unemployment rate hovers around 5.4%, consistently above the national average. But the labor market tells a darker story. Good-paying private sector jobs are scarce outside of a few industries. Young workers leave for Texas, Colorado, or Arizona, draining the state of its most productive residents. The talent pipeline is broken, and it's not being fixed. Poverty rates remain among the highest in the nation, over 18%. Child poverty is even worse, with New Mexico consistently ranking at or near the bottom, nationally. These aren't just statistics. They represent communities where families are already in survival mode before any recession arrives, where children go hungry, where parents work multiple jobs and still can't make ends meet. For homeowners, the risks are significant. The median home value sits around $280,000. but markets outside of Albuquerque and Santa Fe are stagnant or declining. Rural areas have seen population loss for years. Properties there can sit unsold for months or years. If you need to liquidate during an economic downturn, you may take a devastating loss. Healthcare access is another concern. Large portions of the state are designated as medically underserved areas. Hospital closures, doctor shortages, and long distances to care create real risks for residents, especially older Americans who may have relocated for retirement and now find themselves far from adequate medical services. New Mexico's federal dependency masks deep vulnerabilities. When recession hits and the private economy contracts, there's almost nothing underneath to catch the fall. Alaska markets itself as the last frontier. Rugged independence, natural beauty, and resource wealth. But the financial reality is far more precarious than the tourism brochures suggest. The state's economy is almost entirely dependent on oil. Petroleum revenues fund roughly 85% of Alaska's state budget. There's no state income tax and no state sales tax. Sounds great until you realize the whole system collapses when oil prices drop. There's no backup plan, no alternative revenue stream, just oil. In 2015 and 2016, when oil crashed below $40 a barrel, Alaska's budget went into immediate crisis. The state has never fully recovered. The permanent fund dividend, the annual payment to residents from oil wealth, has been cut repeatedly. What used to be over $2,000 per person has been slashed to a fraction of that amount. Families who counted on that check to make ends meet are now struggling. The cost of living in Alaska is among the highest in the nation. Groceries, heating, housing, healthcare. Everything costs more because of the state's isolation. A gallon of milk can cost twice what it does in the lower 48. Heating bills in winter can reach hundreds of dollars monthly. When recession hits and incomes fall, these costs become crushing. There's nowhere to cut. For homeowners, Alaska presents unique risks. The real estate market is thin and volatile. Home values in Anchorage have seen wild swings. Properties outside major population centers can be nearly impossible to sell. If you need to relocate for work during a downturn, you may be forced to abandon your investment entirely. Walk away and take the loss. The population has been declining for years. Young people leave for opportunities elsewhere. Retirees often can't handle the harsh climate and isolation. This demographic drain weakens the tax base and makes economic recovery even harder. Fewer people means fewer businesses, fewer services, fewer reasons to stay. Climate change is creating real infrastructure costs. Permafrost thaw is damaging roads, buildings, and pipelines across the state. Coastal erosion threatens entire communities. Villages are literally falling into the sea. These aren't hypothetical future problems. They're happening now, and the state doesn't have the budget to address them. The promise was frontier opportunity and oil wealth. The reality is a state that's one sustained price crash away from fiscal catastrophe. If this helps you understand what's really happening in the economy, hit subscribe. It's free and it means you'll never miss these breakdowns. Most people have no idea how exposed these states really are. But the next one on our list might hit closer to home than you expect. These aren't backwater economies. They're states with famous cities and national reputations. Illinois presents the single most dramatic case of fiscal mismanagement in America. The state looks prosperous, Chicago's skyline, Fortune 500 headquarters, world-class universities. But beneath that veneer is a government drowning in debt and dysfunction. The pension crisis is staggering. Illinois owes over $140 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. That's money promised to retired teachers, police officers, firefighters, and state workers. Money the state simply doesn't have. The unfunded ratio is among the worst in the nation, and it gets worse every year as more workers retire, and investment returns fall short of projections. To understand what this means for residents, think about it this way. Every man, woman, and child in Illinois owes over $11,000 just to cover the pension shortfall. That debt doesn't go away. It gets paid through higher taxes, reduced services, or eventual default. Someone has to pay, and that someone is you. Property taxes in Illinois are already among the highest in the nation. The median effective property tax rate exceeds 2.2%, more than double the national average. Homeowners in suburbs around Chicago pay $10,000, $15,000, even $20,000 per year in property taxes alone. That's a mortgage payment just for taxes. When recession hits and home values decline, those tax bills don't drop proportionally. You end up paying crisis-level taxes on a house that's lost 20% of its value. The population exodus is accelerating. Illinois has lost residents for 8 consecutive years. Over 100,000 people left in the last census period alone. They're fleeing to Indiana, Tennessee, Texas, Florida, anywhere with lower taxes and better fiscal management. This outflow shrinks the tax base and increases the burden on everyone who stays. The people leaving are often the highest earners. The ones who remain shoulder a heavier load. For anyone with retirement savings tied to Illinois, whether through property, state bonds, or pension systems, the risk is severe. The state has been downgraded repeatedly by credit rating agencies. Another recession could push Illinois toward becoming the first state to effectively default on its obligations. Why do you think Illinois politicians keep promising to fix the pension crisis while making it worse every single year? The promise was Midwestern stability and economic opportunity. The reality is a state that's been borrowing against its future for decades, and the bill is coming due. Nevada built its identity on risk, gambling, entertainment, and speculation. But the state's economy has become the biggest gamble of all, and working families are the ones holding losing tickets. Tourism drives everything in Nevada: hotels, casinos, restaurants, entertainment venues. The entire economic engine depends on visitors spending money. During the pandemic, that engine shut off almost completely. Over 30% of jobs disappeared virtually overnight. Casino floors went dark. Hotel corridors sat empty. The recovery has been uneven, and another recession would deliver a similar blow. The unemployment rate sits around 6.3%, consistently among the highest in the nation. But the quality of available jobs is the real problem. Service industry positions dominate, offering low wages, no benefits, and zero job security. When times are good, there's work. When times are bad, there's nothing. No fallback, no safety net. Housing in Nevada has become a trap for many residents. During the pandemic boom, prices in Las Vegas and Reno skyrocketed. Buyers flooded in from California, bidding up properties and pricing out locals. Cash offers above asking price became normal. Now, as the market cools, 19% of Nevada homeowners are underwater, owing more on their mortgages than their homes are worth. For anyone who bought at the peak, selling means realizing a massive loss, or staying trapped in a house you can't afford. The state's rainy day fund has improved but remains inadequate for the volatility Nevada faces. When your entire economy depends on discretionary consumer spending, recessions hit harder and faster than in diversified states. The reserves that look healthy in good times evaporate when hotel rooms sit empty and casino floors go quiet. Water scarcity adds another layer of risk. Lake Mead, the primary water source for Las Vegas, has hit historic lows. The bathtub ring around the lake grows wider every year. Long-term drought and population growth have created a crisis that will require massive infrastructure investment. Where that money comes from during a recession is anyone's guess. For retirees who move to Nevada for low taxes and warm weather, the calculation has changed. Property values are volatile, services are strained, and the economy offers no stability. The desert paradise has a price, and recession will reveal exactly how high it is. Kentucky was once considered a model of affordable, working-class stability. Politicians pointed to low housing costs, a central location, and a diversified economy as proof the state was positioned for growth. The data tells a different story. The coal industry collapse has devastated eastern Kentucky. Towns that once had thriving main streets now have more abandoned buildings than occupied ones. Storefronts with plywood where windows used to be, churches with shrinking congregations, schools with declining enrollment. Unemployment in former coal counties runs 2 to 3 times the state average. Entire generations have watched their economic foundation disappear. The state's rainy day fund sits at roughly 7.6% of the annual budget. Better than some states on this list, but far below what's needed for stability. Kentucky has chronically underfunded its reserves, preferring to spend money in the present rather than prepare for future downturns. When recession hits, that short-term thinking becomes catastrophic. The pension crisis is another ticking bomb. Kentucky's pension system is among the worst funded in America. Unfunded liabilities exceed $40 billion. Teachers, state workers, and public safety employees are counting on retirement benefits that the state simply cannot afford to pay. Something has to give. Either benefits get cut, taxes get raised, or the state defaults on its obligations. None of those options is painless. Healthcare access has been eroding for years. Rural hospital closures have left large portions of the state without nearby emergency care. Opioid addiction has strained medical systems and social services beyond capacity. Overdose deaths remain among the highest in the nation. These aren't problems that go away during recession. They multiply. For homeowners, Kentucky presents a difficult calculation. The median home price, around $185,000, sounds affordable until you consider the stagnant job market and declining population in many areas. Properties that seem like bargains can become anchors if you need to sell quickly. You might own the cheapest house on the block, but if nobody's buying, it doesn't matter. The manufacturing sector, once a source of stable middle-class jobs, has been in decline. Auto plants have laid off thousands. Suppliers have closed or relocated. The jobs that replace them pay less and offer fewer benefits. Kentucky's politicians promised a new economy would replace the old one. Instead, residents got half measures and empty rhetoric while the structural problems grew worse. Don't go anywhere. The states coming up are the ones everyone thinks are safe. They're wrong, and the data proves it. You won't believe what the next one is hiding. Arizona has been one of the fastest-growing states in America. That growth has been marketed as proof of economic vitality. New residents, new jobs, new development. But rapid growth creates its own vulnerabilities, and Arizona is now dangerously exposed. The housing market tells the clearest story. During the pandemic boom, Arizona home prices exploded. Phoenix, Tucson, Mesa. Every major market saw double-digit appreciation year after year. Buyers relocated from California, paying cash and bidding up properties far beyond what local incomes could support. Bidding wars became normal. Buyers waived inspections. Prices spiraled out of control. Now the market is cooling rapidly. Inventory has surged. Days on market have increased. Sellers who expected quick profits are slashing prices to attract offers. For anyone who bought at the peak, the equity they thought they had is evaporating. Paper wealth disappearing in real time. The job market is more fragile than the growth numbers suggest. Arizona added thousands of jobs in construction, real estate, and hospitality, all sectors that contract sharply during recession. When building stops and visitors stay home, those jobs disappear, and the workers who filled them have few alternatives. Unemployment sits around 5.8%, but the quality of employment is concerning. Many of the new jobs created during the boom were low-wage service positions, without benefits or stability. The manufacturing and technology sectors remain relatively small compared to states with more diversified economies. Water scarcity is no longer a future problem. It's happening now. Arizona has been forced to accept cuts in its Colorado River allocation. Farmers are fallowing fields. New developments face restrictions. For a state that built its growth model on cheap land and endless expansion, water constraints represent an existential threat. You can't grow a city without water. The rainy day fund, while improved, remains below optimal levels. Arizona has a history of aggressive spending during good times and painful cuts during downturns. The state's response to the 2008 financial crisis included devastating education cuts that took years to reverse. The same pattern could repeat. For retirees who moved to Arizona expecting stable property values and low costs, the equation has changed. Insurance rates are rising. Utility costs are climbing. Home values are uncertain. the Sunbelt dream has some dark clouds on the horizon. Oregon might seem like a surprising choice for the top spot. The state has a reputation for progressive policies, natural beauty, and a thriving Portland economy. But beneath the surface, Oregon faces a perfect storm of vulnerabilities that make it uniquely exposed to recession. The state has no sales tax, which sounds like a benefit until you understand what it means for fiscal stability. Oregon relies almost entirely on income taxes for revenue. When recession hits and incomes fall, state revenue collapses immediately. There's no diversified tax base to cushion the blow, no backup, just a single point of failure. During the 2008 financial crisis, Oregon's budget cratered. Schools cut weeks from the academic calendar. State services were slashed across the board. Libraries closed. Parks went unmaintained. The same dynamics would repeat in any significant downturn, and the state hasn't fundamentally changed its fiscal structure since then. Portland, which drives much of the state's economy, has been in visible decline. Downtown storefronts sit empty. For lease signs outnumber open businesses on some blocks. Office vacancy rates have exceeded 25% in some areas. Major employers have relocated or downsized. The city that was once a model of urban renewal now struggles with homelessness, crime, and business flight. The transformation has been shocking. The housing market in Oregon has become severely unaffordable. The median home price in Portland exceeds $500,000, far beyond what local wages can support. Young families are priced out entirely. Workers commute from further and further away. Traffic gets worse. Quality of life declines. When recession hits and demand softens, prices will fall. But that correction will devastate homeowners who stretch to buy at inflated prices. The job market is concentrated in a few vulnerable sectors. Technology, healthcare, and government account for the majority of good-paying jobs. A tech downturn, which appears to be underway, would ripple through the entire state economy. Layoffs at one company lead to reduced spending at local businesses, which leads to more layoffs. The spiral accelerates. Rural Oregon faces different but equally severe challenges. Timber communities never recovered from the decline of the logging industry. Small towns have aging populations, limited services, and no clear economic path forward. These areas are already in recession. They just haven't been noticed by anyone in Portland or Salem. Oregon's pension system carries significant unfunded liabilities. The state has made incremental reforms, but the fundamental problem remains. Promises have been made that can't be kept without either massive tax increases or painful benefit cuts. The homeless crisis is another drain on state resources. Oregon has one of the highest per capita homeless populations in the country. Tent encampments in parks and under bridges. The costs of shelters, services, cleanup, and healthcare strain budgets that are already stretched thin. For anyone who invested in Oregon, whether through property, business, or career, the risks are severe. The state's progressive image masks fiscal fragility that recession will expose brutally. Do you think it's a coincidence that the states with the best reputations often hide the worst financial secrets? The promise was quality of life and economic opportunity. The reality is a state running on income tax revenue that vanishes the moment the economy turns. When recession hits, Oregon won't just struggle. It will face choices that hurt everyone who stayed. What state do you live in? Drop it below. And tell us, have you noticed the warning signs in your area? Ever noticed how these states keep struggling but never seem to fix the real problems? Now, it's not all doom and gloom. Some states have done the hard work to prepare for economic downturns. And if you're thinking about relocating or investing, these two deserve your attention. Because while some states are running on fumes, others have built real foundations. Texas stands out for its economic resilience. The state has no income tax, yet maintains healthy reserves exceeding 12% of its annual budget. That's real cushion when times get tough. The economy is genuinely diversified. Energy, technology, healthcare, manufacturing, and agriculture all contribute significantly. No single industry dominates. Job growth has been consistent, and the population continues to expand as workers and businesses relocate from higher-cost states. The median home price remains reasonable relative to incomes in most markets outside Austin. Property taxes are higher, but the overall cost equation still works for most families. While no state is recession-proof, Texas has the fiscal flexibility and economic breadth to weather downturns better than most. The lesson here is simple. A diversified economy and responsible reserves create real security. Utah offers another model of stability. The state consistently ranks among the best managed in America. Rainy day fund reserves exceed 15%. That's enough to absorb real shocks without slashing services. Unemployment runs below the national average even during tough times. The tech sector in Salt Lake City and Provo has created high-paying jobs without the same boom-bust volatility seen elsewhere. Housing prices have risen, but the state has maintained relatively affordable options outside major metros. Population growth is strong, driven by young families and skilled workers who see opportunity. Utah's secret is boring governance, balanced budgets, sustainable pension systems, and conservative fiscal planning. It's not exciting, but it works. They save during good times, so they have options during bad times. For anyone looking for financial stability, Utah demonstrates what's possible when a state prioritizes long-term health over short-term politics. Not all states are created equal, and some could put your entire financial future at risk. The warning signs are there if you know where to look. From empty rainy day funds to collapsing industries, the data doesn't lie. But knowledge is power, and now you have it. You know which states are vulnerable. You understand why, and you can make better decisions about where to live, work, and invest. Subscribe now, and if you're watching on TV, tap your remote so you never get blindsided again.